Now, Dr. Gutenson, you call this course Ministry in a Postmodern Context. Tell us a little bit about what you have in mind.
Well, Zach, ministry is always carried out in a particular set of circumstances, a particular context, if you will. A wise man once observed that the gospel is typically communicated through the culture that's prevalent at that particular time. It serves as the context for the message. That culture defines the forms our thinking takes. It defines the metaphors that we use to try to communicate. And it identifies the presuppositions that we take utterly for granted about the way the world works. The context for today is probably best characterized as the postmodern context. Now, a lot of these things that I've named, the metaphors, the presuppositions about how we assume the world works, most of us take those things so utterly for granted that we don't even give them a second thought. But if we Christians are going to have faithful and effective ministry in a postmodern world, then we need to understand how postmoderns think, and we need to be able to communicate with them in terms, phrases, and language that makes sense to them.
All right, now you've mentioned postmodernity several times, and you've also mentioned it as a particular way of seeing and understanding the world. What are its major points?
Postmodern thought, I would say, is characterized by the phrase a hermeneutic of suspicion. This is not an uncommon term frequently used by folks who talk about postmodern thought. Perhaps the central component then of postmodernity is this suspicion of just about everything. Things are not as they seem. Claims about the nature of the world, they say, are primarily about trying to establish their way of seeing the world as normative or standard. Anyone who makes these grand narratives that try to explain the way the world works according to the postmodern, that's just an attempt to make your way of seeing the world the norm. And of course, if you succeed in doing that, then it gives you a great deal of power, you and your group. Postmoderns attempt to shield themselves from being manipulated in that way. And one of the ways that they try to do that is through a series of questions. First, they ask, by what authority do you speak? What gives power and credence to the claims that you make? Second, why should I accept that particular way of viewing authority as normative or binding on me? And then third, let's say that I don't agree with you about your answer to the question about authority. Well, why would you think that I would agree with you then about questions around how I'm supposed to live? Postmoderns generally argue that no truth claims are absolute, and that you can only judge the truth or the falseness of a particular claim within its own paradigm. And so they see religions like that as well. Christian truth claims are true or false within the Christian way of viewing the world, but they don't apply beyond that. Those are sort of the general characteristics of postmodernity.
Now, this Doctor of Ministry course will have a particular structure, content, flow. How do you see this course unfolding throughout the semester?
Well, the most important thing is to make sure that we can understand how postmoderns think, we can understand the underpinnings to how they view the world, and then we can begin to grasp that and articulate it in a way that makes sense. So the first thing we'll do is spend some time looking at the socio-cultural trends of the last 50 or so years, that period of time when most people consider postmodernity to have arisen and then to gain sway in the public at large. Now, in addition to the on-campus work, though, we're going to spend some time at churches who are doing effective ministry in a postmodern context, perhaps as few as 4 or as many as 8. And we're going to spend time with those different pastoral teams, making sure that we understand how it is that they're being successful. And then the last part of the class, we're going to have to spend talking about communicating the gospel in this particular context, in this particular time frame. And we'll be looking at questions like, how do you frame the message? How is it focused? What sort of metaphors do the best job of connecting the biblical narratives with the narratives of our own lives? I mean, in short, it's trying to make sense of how we see ourselves living into what the biblical narrative describes as the world.
Well, Dr. Gutenson, I really appreciate your time, and as a result of this time, I'll probably sign up for the class myself.
Well, we'd be sure glad to have you, Zach. And any of the rest of you folks who are interested in this course, you should be in touch with United as soon as possible.